Good afternoon, guys. This is a podcast summary of yesterday's Skype session. The main topics of the day, they were schemata and also ownership. But before that, I started with a simple question for you all to answer and think about it for a couple of minutes, and that is, what are the greatest challenges that you experience as an English language teacher? Now, using the Skype chat function, there were a lot of good answers. Just to sum up, I think that the majority touched in on the question of getting every single pupil involved, and also getting them to speak English. And also a challenge that was seemed to be typical for you as teachers is that it's a challenge for yourselves to speak enough English in class. Right, so with that as a background, then we moved over to talk about the principles of language learning, and give me a couple of seconds to pull up a PowerPoint that we did use for that occasion. Right, language skills is basically down to one single word, and that is communication. We roughly divide language skills into two groups, two categories. They are the receptive skills, listening and reading, and also the productive skills, speaking and writing. Now, these skills do interact, and you cannot learn them all separately. Learning a language is a little bit like learning how to swim. You can't learn to use your right arm the first week, your left leg the second week, breathe out the third week, left arm the fourth week, breathe in the fifth week, etc. You're not going to survive. You're going to sink. You're going to drown. You certainly won't be a very successful swimmer. And the same goes for language. You can't just listen, just speak, just read, or just write. Even when I say just read, I mean you all the other skills will be there in the background. So then, the receptive and the productive skills, they do go hand in hand. It's down to the input-output approach, and they feed of each other, and then they cause the upward spiral of learning. So the more you see and hear, the more you learn. An example here is Tarzan, Edgar Rice Burroughs' popular character, and when you see in the movies, whether it be the new Disney versions or the old 1930s versions with Johnny Weissmuller, you will probably remember Tarzan is very limited in his speech, his vocabulary. It's typically like, me Tarzan, you Jane, or in modern day terms, me Donald, you Melanie. Learning a language is learning a foreign language. It's very, very much like learning or acquiring your mother tongue. Typically, you could think of your own kids. If you have kids, how do they learn language? You can visualize this little kid sitting at the breakfast table, looking out the window and say, in Norwegian, "Å, se bil." Okay, that's fine. We applaud this kid. Great, good job. You've got the word bil. As the kid is exposed to more language, becomes more knowledgeable, in the world around him, he'll say, "Å, se en blå bil." Next step on development would be, "Se en lyseblå bil." Okay, so you've got the car and you've got the colors nailed fairly well. And then the next step then is, what kind of car is it? "Å, se en lyseblå Volvo." Okay, so you learn again. Next step is se en lyseblå Volvo V70. Okay, again, as this child develops, you should be able to say se en lyseblå V70 2,4 diesel. And again, as the child's world is expanded and providing the interest in cars is there, by the end of ungdomsskolen, when you're kind of fed up going to school, at least you can look out the window eating your Cheerios, and you can say, se, der har jo en lyseblå Volvo med fargekode 0046, en V70, 2,4 liter diesel, og det er en feil på innsprøytningsdyset på tredje sylinderen. Okay, a little bit far-fetched, but I mean, you get my drift. This is how you develop your language and vocabulary. And you also develop based on other exposition. It could be from television, radio, YouTube, any source you can think of. Come to that. And again, all this, is kind of put together. Input. You learn how to. How the words are pronounced. You're able to reproduce these words, these sentences. You'll get feedback. Yes, very good. Not quite what I was thinking about, etc. And then generates new input, output, feedback, etc. Now, speaking is a great stimulus and way of preparing your own language development. To speak, when you speak to somebody, you will get a response either in a more formal correction, formal assessment, or some kind of other response like body language, where you, for example, say something in a foreign language and the listener just goes, I don't know, or thumbs up, a big smile, a nod, a shake of your head, etc. So, whatever type of feedback you get, it is going to ensure that you either carry on the good work you put in, or that you have to change your approach to the language slightly. And again, text as models, it's very often difficult to create your own text, for example, if you haven't read enough texts yourselves. To put it bluntly, you can't write a short story if you haven't read a few short stories yourselves. And again, the text also shows you different combinations of words, sentences, and again, gives you some ideas and some stimulation and motivation for carrying on your work. And integrated tasks. Most of the tasks that we carry out in school today, they are integrated. It's very, very seldom these days that we work with a pure grammar lesson, working only with prepositions or working only with verb tenses. Very often the tasks are integrated, meaning that they have a content as well as a function. Right, so to be able to communicate then, we need something called schemata, or in the singular form, schema. And this sums up, what is our preconception, our pre-knowledge of certain things and concepts in the world. Okay, we all know what a bicycle is, yeah? I'm quite sure that having 60 students in front of me, and I tell you all to draw a bicycle, you will all complete the task, but I'm quite sure there will not be any two identical bicycles. They will all be different, because you have your own perception of a bicycle, and of course we also have different drawing skills. But again, you all will have something in common. Your drawing will have two wheels, it will have a handlebar, it will have a frame, it will have a seat, it will have pedals, etc. So, we have a common understanding, we have a common schema of the word or the term or the concept bicycle. Okay, so a bicycle in Norway has the same basic form and function as a bicycle in Congo or a bicycle in China. Now, there's a small task given out to you, and that is, what elements do you expect to find in an office? What defines an office? A lot of answers were desk, computer, papers, post-it notes, coffee mugs, chairs, books, papers, scissors, etc. Now, these are the 5 things that I, in my day, connected to the term office. Again, computer, papers, desk, telephone, and chair. And it doesn't matter where in the world you are. If you have an office in Oslo, if you have an office in the White House, or if you have an office in Nigeria where you're having an online business selling watches, operating, we all have a common concept of an office. It's a place where we work, and it has certain content and has a certain function. Now, a schema for practical use. As an example, we can take the word stairs. Now, asked to define what stairs are, there were a number of good responses in yesterday's Skype session, and you all agreed that it is some kind of a contraption that can ensure movement either up or down. So, looking at stairs, we have an image of stairs here. These are also stairs, and again, the fire escape stairs on the outside of a building. They look different, but they all have the same function. And again, when we think in the term stairs, stairs are the same where we are in Bodø, Nesna, Levanger, Oslo, New York, Delhi, wherever we are in the world. Stairs are stairs. They have the same function, even though they do not have the same visual look. Now, as I've noted down on this slide here, the challenge here is to address and cater for the individual schemata of the learners. And we can think in terms of different cultures in the classroom. How do we see, for example, human rights from a Chinese perspective or from a Norwegian perspective? How do you perceive freedom of speech in Norway, and how is it perceived in some of the countries in the Middle East, as examples? Snow is a concept that we take for granted here in Norway. We know how we can play in the snow. We know the feeling of the snow. It's cold, it can be dry, it can be wet, slushy. We can make snowmen, snowballs. We know exactly when the snow is not of the right consistency to pick a snowball fight, and we also know when not to dive headfirst into a large pile of snow from the roof or some other high point, in order to avoid knocking ourselves unconscious. We also know that sometimes the snow will carry you, and sometimes you'll sink through it. And this is something that we in Norway take for granted. Now, take somebody in the Caribbean islands, for example. They all know what snow is per definition. They've seen movies with snow. They've seen pictures of snow, so they know what the concept is, but they do not know the practical implications, the feeling that we in Norway have. Age has a lot to do with the individual schemata. Now, if we take the term boyfriend and anticipate how the little girl on the left would perceive the term boyfriend, I'm quite certain that she would see the boyfriend as a good friend, someone you could build a snowman together with, somebody you can share your lunch with, and generally, play and hang out with. Whereas the young woman to the right, I think that her perception of boyfriend is somewhat different. I don't know what she's doing here. Maybe she's complaining that he's late again, or she's calling her lawyer to arrange for a divorce. I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. I think we can agree that she understands the term boyfriend slightly differently than the little girl. And also gender. This is a little bit tricky one. I don't want to generalize too much, but yes, there is in many areas a difference between gender, how we understand different concepts and understand the world. Ask anybody and they will agree that usually the woman in the household has a slightly different view of what is clean and what is tidy than the man. Family status may also play an important role in the individual schemata. For example, in this case, the woman on the left, we assume she is childless. She's spending time drinking wine at some fancy party. She would have a different concept of, for example, small children than the mother on the right. International diverse culture. We have briefly mentioned the concept of human rights. Again, been in the media the last few years. Norway criticizing China for not seeing human rights in the same light as Norwegians do. We also have diverse culture, as in this slide. We have two pictures. They are both of towns. We all know what the town is, right? Well, the town to the left is very, very different from the town to the right. And I guess you might recognize the town to the top right. Of course, that is on the Greek island, and it's Santorini. And we also need to take local diverse culture into consideration. Now, especially in our area, living on the coast, this could well be the place to hang out on a Saturday afternoon. This is the center, so to say, of the community. This is where you meet friends. This is where you get news. This is where you find means of transportation, etc. So this could be the place to be on a Saturday afternoon in a small community on one of the islands along the coast, whereas this would be the place to hang out if you live in Oslo or a city. Again, the function is the same, where to hang out, where to meet people. But, we have a very different perception of what is a center of a community. So when it comes to forming schemata, it is exposure, exposure, exposure. Not just in terms of language, but also in terms of experience, in terms of travel, speaking to people, experiencing things firsthand, reading things secondhand. There's a number of different ways that you can get input from the world around you. Now back to language as communication. Language is communication, and if you have nothing to communicate, there's no need for language. So you're all asked, what type of information do we need, or do we see the need to communicate to somebody else? And you all put it quite rightly. Number one, we need to communicate basic needs. Think of the young child. Mama, Papa, okay? You need somebody who can help you provide for your basic needs. Okay? Mat, mjölk, brød, sulten, tørst. Okay? The very basic need. Kald, varm, svett. Again, the young child, the first thing he or she needs to communicate is basic needs to survive as an individual. Now, the next step that you suggested quite rightly is the need to communicate emotions. You need to communicate that you are tired, happy, sad, angry, upset, etc. And then after that, the third element was more things of personal interest. You like to talk about friends, you like to talk about hobbies, you like to talk about things that go on in your world, the need for transportation, can somebody drive me here, can somebody drive me there, etc. They're not basic needs. You will survive even if mom or dad can't drive you to swimming practice that one day of the week. But it's nice to be able to communicate that you have a wish, you have a desire. So, what language do we communicate in? Well, first of all, we communicate in a mother tongue. And then we may communicate in a foreign language when out traveling or learning English or French, Spanish, German at school. And we also will encounter sign language. Now, sign language could be anything like, thumbs up, peace and love, hang loose, etc. But it can also be signs in form of something that you see every day when you're out driving, traffic signs. They communicate information. And you may see emoticons in short form communication on social media. There are lots of icons on the computer screen, etc. We have body language, not just thumbs up. You can survive in any place in the world. If you're hungry, you can go or rub your stomach. You need food. If you go into a shop or a restaurant anywhere in the world, you can do like this, and you will be offered, or at least given the option of a drink. And of course, you can the body language of a teenager says it all. When you look up and roll your eyes, there are other obscene gestures. If you are not feeling very comfortable or you are defensive, you can sit like this, etc. All these signals you give, you can use your hands to talk. Say, I want to use an ironic expression. They not only send a message by themselves, but they also enhance whatever topic you are speaking about. Music, again, you can communicate by music. Different types of music will enhance different moods, different emotions that you have a wish to communicate. When you go to the gym for a workout, you might like to have a different type of music than when your boyfriend or girlfriend has just broken up with you and you feel a bit melancholy. Well, I don't know. I guess you could probably play AC/DC's Highway to Hell, whether you're in a gym or whether you've been dumped, ditched. But anyway, different types of music, they will enhance and complement other forms of communication. And again, language of love is also a form of communication, not necessarily the love between boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, but also of caring for friends, for pupils, a pat on the back, a gentle ruffle of the hair as you go by, stroking somebody's cheek, to support them if they're upset, etc. And again, on the very other end of the scale, you have computer language, which is basically made up of ones and zeros. Right. So we now have a need to communicate. We have something we would like to communicate, but how do we communicate? Well, as a starting point, we need a sender. Okay, somebody has to say something or write something, and it's no point saying something or expressing your needs if nobody is there to listen to you. So we have a on the one hand we have a sender, and on the other hand we have a receiver. Now, if I as a sender would like to describe this item for you, it's a rectangle, it's got like muddy yellow brownish type of color, and I need to explain this to you. If I don't have it available, I can't show it to you. I need to explain to you exactly what I'm thinking about. I need to encode this visualization, this image. I can't just tell people to read my mind. I have to give them some kind of idea what I'm thinking about. So then we move on to the receiver, and if I have expressed myself clearly and the receiver has understood what I'm trying to express myself, he or she should be able to visualize the exact identical object or image, thought or idea that I do as a starting point. So the sender needs to encode and the receiver needs to decode in order to promote understanding. Now, if I as a sender visualize the rectangle on the left and the receiver visualizes the parallelogram on the right, we have something called a partial decoding. It's pretty close, okay? The receiver hasn't misunderstood completely, but it's not quite what I as a sender have had in mind. A partial decoding can also take place if you give a text on nuclear power plants to a 10-year-old. He or she would be able to read the text, letter by letter, word by word. So in that aspect, manage to decode the text that's written, but I do not see that this 10-year-old will be able to fully realize the possible consequences of a nuclear power plant, the political discussions about ethics, the climate changes, what happens if there's a core meltdown, health hazards, etc., etc. So again, we have a partial decoding. I understand most of it, maybe, but not everything. So to sum up then, I claim that if you can correctly draw a text, you understand. And if there's understanding, there is communication. I'm quite sure we are able to draw any text that is provided. I did exemplify yesterday in my Skype session that it is no problem drawing Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. I'm not a very good artist, but at least I can draw stick men and stick figures. And by simply making a character gallery from the play, you can, for example, draw blue lines between characters who have a positive relationship, red lines between the ones who have a negative relationship, and thus you can develop the play with just using 2 to 4 different drawings. And especially those of you who have teenagers in the house, or if you have been a teenager yourselves not so long ago, you will very often come across the typical discussion or the frustration over the lack of communication between parents and teenagers. And we have a very, very good expression in Norwegian that can be used when you come to the end of the road, you're totally frustrated, and you say, "Skjønner du tegninga? Skjønner du tegninga?" This is exactly what I've been talking about. If you can draw or visualize something, you're able to understand it. Right, so here we talk about the basics of communication. Now, after that, we did go on to talk a little bit about ownership. And ownership is a concept that we can use to motivate and engage different pupils with different interests and different learning styles. Now, what we did do in class during Skype, I did ask you all to bring out find a blank sheet of paper, and what I'll do now, I'm going to make a fortune teller, or as I say in Norwegian, spåkopp. And the great thing about working this way is that I didn't mention the character of Little Johnny. Now, Little Johnny, he is the embodiment of anything that can go wrong. He is the embodiment of all diagnosis. He's got ADHD, he's got different learning disabilities, he falls off the back of a chair in class, he is the one whose little brother flushes his homework down the toilet before going to school, etc. So now Little Johnny, he's also very shy, and he has problems speaking in class, making an oral presentation. Now, what I'm doing here is actually showing you how you can give an oral presentation without having your own face in focus. And here I can give a demonstration of how to make a fortune teller. And this is something that you can do in class from when the kids are quite young. You can either draw something, make something, and they can say what they are doing. And Little Johnny, he has a Teflon brain. He just can't remember anything. So what he can do in this case, he can make a fortune teller, and beside him, outside of the camera, he can have a text with the words that he can actually read what he's doing. So to show you how Little Johnny can work, here it goes. So we start making a fortune teller. We fold over double, and again, for those of you who see the challenge of mathematics as a basic skill in English, we're talking about to double. Okay, so double over, fold something in two. So already here we work with mathematical terms. Okay, and then we fold over again. Not that you need to be reminded how to make a fortune teller, but anyway, here it goes. And here Little Johnny can say we fold each point into the center, we flip the paper over and do the same thing again. And of course, now I haven't told you what not to do, so if I don't tell you stop now, I'm guaranteed that a lot of you will do like this, and you will use it in this way, and you will put numbers on it, etc. Don't do that. Start with the 4 clean squares diagonally. Where have we heard that before? Diagonally, diagonally. Diagonally. Okay, never mind. Here, so diagonally, here we go. Put your finger under the top square, and then fold, double, finger on the top square, fold in 2, and here we have a little character. A quick job with a pen. We have here a little piece of ownership. Okay, this is mine. Okay, and especially now that you are sitting in front of a computer screen somewhere miles away, you certainly cannot steal this one from me. No way. You cannot say that this is yours. This is mine, 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 and only mine. So here we go. Now, the basic needs are also some of the things that we teach our young kids at an early stage. You know, my name is, I'm happy, I am sad, I am angry, I am upset, etc. Now, working with a fortune teller like this, we have here room to draw 4 different faces, and we can draw 4 different emotions. So here we have, I don't know, I'm try to make him a little bit more angry maybe. Okay, and little Johnny has a problem learning words. So here what we can do on the back side, we can write the keywords. As here, I know it is reversed, but never mind. If you're able to visualize, it says angry here. So here we can have a character, and we can give different character traits. And with this one, you can actually act out individually on your own the 3 billy goats gruff. You have 1 troll, and you have room for 3 billy goats, and on the side, on the back here, there is room to write keywords that you need to use in your story. Now, little Johnny, who is hopeless, he's dyslexic, he's got ADHD, and again, he's got all the letters in the alphabet attached to him. He can still make a fortune teller and make a nice character, and thus he has succeeded with the first part of this English session. He might not be willing to speak English, but he can certainly hold the camera when one of his buddies gives this little presentation. Right, so here's just one little idea, and of course you can, if you want to do role play, you can flip it out. Oops, and you have a little Loch Ness monster or some other type of character. Right, so moving on to ownership then, to a bit more sort of theoretical background. I don't know, maybe not theoretical, but anyway, a different approach. So here we go then. Give me a few seconds while I bring up, I get another PowerPoint presentation. So what is ownership? Well, I gave this task to share your view or your understanding or definition of ownership. Now, why I've given a task in the tweet format is that I can seek to draw out your schema, and at the same time I can use the tweet format, and I can remind you that the tweet format has a maximum length of 140 characters, blah 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 blah. So thus I also bring in a little bit of digital competence into this little session. Now, the tweet format serves well when it comes to creating a text, because remember, little Johnny, he has great problems. A text that is more than 1 or 2 lines, I mean, that is an obstacle for him. Okay, but when you tell little Johnny that you are not allowed to write more than 140 characters, okay, he will be overjoyed, and he said, I don't have to write more. Woohoo! Hey, I can do that. I can manage less than 140. Even I can do that. And he would spend some of his time finding some words, and then he'll sit there counting, either manually, or if he has a Word document he's working on, he can use the function in a document that would count the characters. And if he does that, hey presto, he's already working with digital competence as one of the basic skills. So anyway, so little Johnny, this is something that he can do. He can stick to a length of less than 140 characters. Whereas the so-called faster learner, the learner who has so much to say on this, is forced to be rational in his or her presentation of ideas. You cannot use a lot of adjectives and adverbs here. You need to be very short, very concise. For some, that is a great challenge. So here the weaker learner is sorry, I'm not allowed to say weaker. I mean slower learner. The slower learner is challenged with something that he is able to fulfill, to achieve, and the faster learner is challenged that he or she has to be able to economize with the language and ideas, has to prioritize what is important in my text, what words serve a better function than the others. Right, so enough about tweet formats. So the first definition here, in number 1, the exclusive right to control, use, and publications of ideas and product is what you often would find when you search for ownership. Okay, that is not that applicable for our use. We should more look towards number 2, which is the option of selecting a theme, product goal, and the necessary knowledge and skills to reach the defined goals. So when we settle for definition number 2, there are 2 main questions that pop up. And the first one is, in what ways may ownership to process and product influence the learner's motivation? And secondly, in what ways may ownership to a process and product influence the learning and competence goals set by the teacher? So this is a topic for discussion. In what ways may ownership to process and product influence the learner's motivation? There are positive sides, and there may also be some negative sides here. Now, ownership to a process and a product are 2 different starting points. In the ownership to a process, then it is the pupil himself or herself who decides in what manner I'm going to reach a given goal, a given product. One very good suggestion that was brought forth by one of you guys yesterday is the English box. Each pupil creates his or her own box, and in that box puts items that corresponds to vocabulary they've been learning. And the outcome is more or less given. The outcome, the product is decided, that you're able to say something about or name the items in this box. Now, the process, the ownership of the process is that the pupil can decide the design of the box, can draw, color, cut, glue, paste, and also decide what goes into this box. So does the learner choose to put in items that are easy to remember the names of, items that have the same word in English and Norwegian, like pen is easy, pronounced the same way, English and Norwegian, or does that pupil wish to put in more items that have quite a difficult spelling and a difficult pronunciation? So that varies. So the process here will be up to the individual. So the pupil has an ownership to the process, but the product is the same. You should be able to produce the same the same things, and that is the name, the vocabulary, or whatever item is in the box. If we go to the other side, then on the other hand, we have ownership to the product, and here we could compare and say, okay, each pupil is given an identical box filled with Scrabble letters, identical Scrabble letters. The process is decided 100% by the teacher. Now, the product that the pupil has ownership over, it would, as an example, be the different words that you may make with these letters. The slower learner, little Johnny, he will be happy to write a motorbike or Harley. Lamborghini, if he's got enough letters. Whereas other learners, they would choose to use different types of words based on their interest and their experience. So, hopping over to the next slide here, we start looking at a little bit at adapted learning. På godt norsk, tilpasset opplæring. Now, adapted for whom? Now, traditionally, we have been looking at an axis from slower to faster learner. Okay, we have the slow ones, and then we have the ones in the middle, and then the faster learners. And this is typically exemplified when we get to textbooks, like A text, a B text, or a C text, or level 1, level 2, level 3 steps or texts. There is also another axis that I would like to take into consideration, and that is an interest axis. As you see, here we do not speak of faster or slower learners. Here we speak of learners of different interests. Are you interested in politics? Are you interested in motorbikes? Are you interested in football? Are you interested in food, etc.? You know, you will be placed somewhere along this interest axis, and you're not placed there on the foundation or basis of a faster, slower learner, but more of what type of interest do you have. So then the question is, how do these axes offer different perspectives on motivation and stigmatization? This is the question to be discussed in your core groups this coming week. And again, here we have both the axes together, and when we place different learners of different abilities on these two, we see here traditional faster and slower axes, and when we combine that with the interest axis, we see the dots which represent the pupils will spread out quite a bit. And when you give any pupil these two axes of learning here, you give them a far wider scope, a wider choice of adapted learning than just following the one axis. So we might have a so-called weak or politically correct slower learner who, given the right topic to work with, will actually show that he or she knows a lot more of English than he or she will show when you are not motivated enough. So this really concludes the session today. Of course, I've spent almost an hour now, which is about half an hour less than yesterday's session. But of course, you did come with input. I did ask some questions that I have addressed here, etc. Now, the last piece of information that I gave you was the process of your submission. Okay, there's a little bit of information on the submission. The task that's given here is for discussion in the core groups, which is then a preparation for your submission. And the second submission for the Bodø group, which is the same as the first submission for the Nesna group, is to make a draft of a learning sequence, a learning session that has ownership as the focal point. And when you do work with this draft, you need, of course, to define ownership. What do you mean by ownership? What do you mean by ownership to the process? What do you mean by ownership to the product? So this has to be in the introduction. I would like you to propose a learning session or a teaching plan, if you wish. You don't have to give me so very many details, just the basic ideas, what you're going to do, the basic aims for the session, preferably linked to the national curriculum, Kunnskapsløftet, and maybe most importantly, the last section, which is didactical reflection. And with didactical reflection, I do not mean just simply a summary of the teaching session, but a reflection over your choices. Why did I choose this method? Why do they work in groups? How are they groups put together? Why are they put together that way? Use at least three theorists or practitioners as reference for your work. Okay, so you've got to put in a little bit of theory in here. And also think about what is the focus in your class. What is your main challenge in your class? Is it to have the pupils to speak more English? Is it a good working environment? Is it for them to work in groups, to cooperate with each other, etc.? Now, this should be reflected in your draft under the section of didactic reflection. And again, at any time, you feel free to give me a ring, send me an email with questions, and I'll help you out the best I can. And also, as a last reminder with your submission, that is, this is something that you are going to plan and try out in your own class. You have from 3 weeks from now until December to carry out, to implement your teaching ideas and to reflect. Okay, I think this just about sums up the session. It has been a very sort of oral, spur of the moment style. Nothing has been written down. Nothing has been planned. I have only tried to say, to duplicate or remember the best I can from yesterday's session. But I think those of you that were present will find that this is a fairly accurate summary of what we went through. And again, at any time, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Okay, thank you.